Have you ever wondered where the limit of kindness is? I used to think it was infinite. Until 5 a.m. this morning, when the sound of metal cutting a chain echoed in the cold Vermont air. I found mine. This is the story of how I took back my house by selling a piece of it. They thought they could lock me in. They didn't know I was the one holding the keys to every door. My name is Margaret, though most folks in Maple Creek just call me Margot. I am 68 years old, and for 40 of those years, I was the head librarian for our town. I am a practical woman. I believe in catalogued facts, the strength of a well-built shelf, and the quiet independence that comes from living a life of order. That order dissolved 2 years ago, the day my husband, Robert, died. It was a sudden, brutal illness that took him, leaving a silence in this house that the Vermont winters only seemed to amplify. Robert was a master carpenter, a man whose hands were rarely still. This house, nestled in the maples just outside of town, was his life's work. He didn't just build it, he breathed life into its beams and joints. Every room holds the echo of his hammer, the scent of sawdust and varnish. The centerpiece, the thing he was most proud of, is the main gate at the end of our drive. It's a heavy, beautiful piece of wrought iron, twisted into the shapes of willow branches. He forged it himself in his workshop as a gift for our 30th wedding anniversary. It was solid, a symbol of the life we had built. 6 months ago, that silence I mentioned was broken. My son, David, and his wife, Sophia, arrived from Boston. They pulled up in a leased sedan packed to the roof, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and something I couldn't quite place, shame. Perhaps David had lost his job. The details were always vague, muttered excuses about restructuring and a difficult market. I didn't press. He was my son. We just need a few months. Mom, David had promised, his eyes avoiding mine as he carried suitcases into the guest room. Just until we can get things sorted out, get back on our feet. Sophia was all smiles and sweet efficiency in those first weeks. She was a whirlwind, helping me with housework I hadn't realized I'd been neglecting, cooking meals that were intricate and modern. She was sharp, much sharper than David, and I noticed immediately how she controlled things. It started small. She'd rearrange the spice rack, then the bookshelves in the living room, placing my well-worn classics behind her glossy self-help hardbacks. Just making things flow better. Margot, she'd say with a bright, tight smile. In my grief, I welcomed the noise. I welcomed the company. That second winter without Robert was bearing down, and their presence felt like a buffer against the crushing loneliness, a distraction from the empty space beside me in bed. I told myself their intrusion was a comfort. Then came the matter of Robert's armchair. It was an old, worn leather recliner that sat by the fireplace, molded perfectly to the shape of his body. It was his sanctuary. One afternoon, I came downstairs to find Sophia and David struggling to get it through the front door. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Sophia stopped, wiping a delicate hand on her yoga pants. "Oh, Margot. Thank goodness. David, be careful with the wall." She turned to me, her expression one of polite concern. "We're just getting rid of this old thing. It absolutely reeks of musty old fabric. It's just not hygienic, and it clashes horribly with the room." Before I could find the words to protest, she was pointing to a sleek, low-profile grey sofa that had been delivered and left on the porch. "I found this online. It's much more modern. Don't you think it will really open up the space? I looked at David. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just shrugged, his shoulders tense. She's right. Mom, it was just an old chair. I stood there, frozen in the entryway, and watched them carry away the last place that truly felt like him. They replaced it with something cold, expensive, and utterly foreign. And I, still drowning in the quiet sorrow of the past 2 years, just watched them do it. I said nothing at all. The few months, David promised, dissolved like snow in April. 2 months became 4, and then the calendar turned over to 6. The snow melted, and the first buds of spring appeared. But nothing changed inside the house. David was still looking for work. His search seemed to consist entirely of marathon sessions in the guest room, the glow of his computer monitor visible under the door late into the night. The sounds that escaped were not of typing cover letters, but of digitized gunfire and shouted commands to teammates. When I asked, he'd say he was networking. Sophia explained he was also helping her develop her online business, a vague enterprise that seemed to involve a lot of brightly coloured packages arriving at the door, and Sophia on the phone using words like downline and synergy. With David unemployed and Sophia's business seemingly consuming money rather than making it, the household finances became Sophia's next project. My pension, which had been more than enough for Robert and me, was now scrutinised daily. Sophia started collecting the mail before I could. She'd sit at the kitchen table, Robert's old workshop calculator clicking under her sharp fingers. "Margot," she'd say, holding up the utility bill, her voice laced with a performer's sigh. "We really need to optimize our spending." Optimization, I learned, was a euphemism for her complete control. She took over the grocery shopping, using my debit card. The pantry, once stocked with the brands I'd used for decades, was now filled with generic labels in stark white and black packaging. The coffee tasted like burnt dirt. The bread dissolved into paste in my mouth. "There's no difference. Margot," she'd chirp. "It's just branding. We're saving 20% this way." When I tried to buy my own tea bags, she intercepted me at the counter, taking them from my hand. "I already bought tea. Mum, we can't be wasteful." The real cracks began to show when my book club, a group of women I'd met with every third Tuesday for 20 years, came for our meeting. I'd baked Robert's favourite lemon scones. We were gathered in the living room, trying to discuss a new novel over the sterile emptiness of the grey sofa. When Sophia emerged from her room, she didn't greet anyone. She simply walked to the stereo, put on some jarring, thumping electronic music, and turned the volume high enough to rattle the windows. We tried to talk over it, but the atmosphere curdled. Eleanor, my oldest friend, kept looking at Sophia, who was now aggressively vacuuming the hallway with undisguised alarm. The meeting ended an hour early, the women gathering their coats with awkward apologies. After they left, the music clicked off. Sophia emerged, looking annoyed. They were so loud. "Margot," I couldn't hear myself think. "It's really an imposition." I was stunned. "They're my friends." "Sophia." "Well, it's just a lot of noise and bother, isn't it?" she replied, not looking at me. My friends, understandably, stopped coming. My invitations became vaguer, and their excuses became more frequent. I waited until Sophia was out, supposedly at a business seminar. I found David in the kitchen, eating cereal straight from the box. "David," I started, my hands shaking slightly. "We need to talk about Sophia?" He didn't look up, just kept crunching. What about her? She's controlling everything. The money, my groceries. She was terribly rude to my friends. They won't come back here. David let out a heavy sigh, the kind he used to use as a teenager when I asked about homework. Sophia is just trying to help us save money. Mum? She's good at that stuff. We're in a tight spot, and she's just trying to keep us organized. Don't be so sensitive. He rinsed his bowl and walked away, headphones slipping over his ears, sealing me out. I was no longer the matriarch of the house. I was a tenant. I was a guest whose preferences were an inconvenience. The realization settled on me, as cold and heavy as the Vermont winter. The final, chilling note of this transition came one evening. We were sitting on the porch as the sun went down. Sophia was scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the blue light. Her gaze drifted to the driveway. "That gate is so old-fashioned," she said idly. "It just makes the whole house look gloomy, and that latch is always sticking. It's probably loose." I stiffened, my hand instinctively going to the locket Robert gave me. "Your father-in-law made that," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "It was our 30th anniversary. It's not loose." Sophia looked up, a slow, insincere smile spreading across her face. "Of course, Margot. I was just worried about security. That's all." With my friends gone and my groceries monitored, the house began to feel less like a home and more like a well-appointed holding cell. My only remaining tether to the person I used to be, to the world beyond Sophia's optimizations, was my volunteer work, every Tuesday and Thursday morning. I drove my old sedan to the Redwood Archive, a small, private library in town that housed Maple Creek's historical records. I'd been volunteering there since my retirement. The scent of old paper and beeswax, the quiet rustle of archival folders, it was my sanctuary. It was the one place Sophia's influence could not reach. One Tuesday morning, I woke before the sun, as I always did. I put on my coat, grabbed my handbag, and walked out the back door, keys in hand. The air was still, with the sharp bite of late winter. I walked down the stone path, past Robert's cold workshop, toward the driveway. I reached the gate, and I stopped. Wrapped around the two center bars of Robert's beautiful ironwork was a thick, black chain. It was looped through several times, pulled tight, and secured with a heavy, brand-new brass padlock. It was an ugly, industrial scar on his art. For a moment, I just stared, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. I pulled on the gate. The chain rattled, loud and final in the morning silence. It held fast. My first thought was that David had done it. Perhaps he'd finally noticed the sticking latch Sophia had mentioned and put this up as a temporary fix. I turned and walked back to the house, my footsteps quickening. I opened the kitchen door and called up the stairs. "Sophia, David." I heard movement, and a few moments later, Sophia appeared at the top of the landing. She was wearing a silk pajama set, her hair tied up in a messy bun. She was holding a large mug of coffee. "Oh, you're up. Margot," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. She descended the stairs slowly. "I didn't expect you to be out this early." "The gate, Sophia," I said, pointing toward the driveway. "It's chained. There's a padlock on it. I can't get my car out." "Oh, that," she said, taking a sip from her mug. "Yes, I locked it up last night. I was reading a neighborhood report online. So many burglaries lately." I was just so worried about our safety. Your safety, mostly. A cold feeling, sharper than the morning air, began to creep up my spine. I see. Well, where is the key? I have to go. I have my volunteer shift at the archive. Sophia's face, which had been a mask of pleasant concern, tightened. She frowned, a small, impatient crease appearing between her brows. Volunteering, Margot. You're 68 years old. You should be at home, resting. It's dangerous for you to be driving around this early. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be. The condescension was a physical slap. My reflexes are perfectly fine. Sophia, I am expected. Please, give me the key. She shook her head, taking another slow sip of coffee. No, I don't think that's a good idea. I'll keep the key. It's safer this way. From now on, if you need to go somewhere, you just tell me or David, and one of us will drive you. This was not concern. This was not safety. I looked at this woman, standing in the home my husband built, coffee mug in hand, calmly informing me that my life was no longer my own. This was a prison. She was deliberately, calmly, incarcerating me. My gaze flickered past her, through the living room to the front window. I could see David. He was sitting on the grey sofa, his back to us, his headphones on. But as I watched, I saw his reflection in the dark glass. He was watching us. He saw the entire exchange. He saw the shock on my face. He heard Sophia's decree. And as my eyes met his reflection, he turned his head away, breaking the contact, pretending to be absorbed in the blank television screen. His silence was a shout. His inaction was his consent. He was her accomplice. The chain wasn't just on the gate. It was around me, and my own son was holding the other end. I looked back at Sophia. Her smile had returned, small and victorious. I felt a wave of nausea, a dizzying sense of disbelief. I had no words. I couldn't fight. The shock was too great. I turned, my body feeling heavy and old, and walked back to my bedroom. I picked up the phone and called the archive, my voice a hollow echo of itself. I told them I was ill. I told them I wouldn't be coming in. The days following the chaining of the gate bled into one another, distinguished only by the meals Sophia deemed appropriate and the volume of the television. My life, once organized by the Dewey Decimal System and my own quiet routines, was now dictated by her whims. I was trapped. To even walk to the mailbox at the end of the drive, I had to ask. Sophia, I need to mail a letter. She would sigh, as if I had asked to borrow $1,000 and retrieved the key from a high hook in the kitchen. She would stand on the porch, arms crossed, while I walked the drive, and I would hear the heavy, definitive click of the padlock behind me before I had even taken 5 steps back toward the house. Leaving the property for any real reason became an exercise in humiliation. My requests were met with a rotating list of excuses, each delivered with a saccharine smile. Oh, Margot, the weather forecast says it's about to rain. I can't have you catching a cold. Or, I was just looking at your car. The check engine light is on. It's not safe. David will look at it. Eventually. David, of course, never did. When I asked him to drive me, Sophia would interject from the other room. David is exhausted. Margot, his job search is incredibly stressful. He needs his rest. He would just nod, mute, from behind his laptop screen. I was not just a librarian. I was a resourceful woman. My first instinct was to fight back with logistics. I retreated to my bedroom, the one room she had not yet completely invaded, and looked up local locksmiths. I found a reputable one. Maple Creek Lock and Key. I dialed the number, my voice low. I explained my situation, omitting the family drama, stating I was the owner and had simply lost the key to my own gate. "No problem, ma'am," the man said. "I'll just need to verify ownership. What's the name on the utility account? We just need to match it for the service call." "Margaret Reynolds," I said, confidently. I heard him typing. A pause. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The primary account holder for that address is listed as Sophia Reynolds." My blood ran cold. "That's my daughter-in-law. She helps me manage the bills." "I understand, ma'am. But policy is policy. I can't service the lock without authorization from the account holder. You'll have to have her call us." I hung up the phone. She had thought of everything. She had been building this wall for months, brick by brick, and I hadn't even noticed. I looked out the window. The Vermont winter was still clinging on, the ground frozen solid. I considered walking. I was healthy enough. But Robert and I had built this house for privacy, for isolation. We were 3 miles from the main road, and another mile from the nearest bus stop. 3 miles, mostly uphill, in the freezing wind. I could perhaps make it there, but I couldn't make it back. And what if I slipped? Sophia would use it as proof of my incompetence, my fragility. I was truly, physically, cut off. David was a ghost. He drifted through the house, headphones permanently affixed, his eyes glued to a screen. He avoided me. If I entered a room, he would mumble an excuse and leave. The silence he offered was more painful than Sophia's open hostility. I finally cornered him in the hallway, blocking his path to the bathroom. "David," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "You see what she is doing. You see that chain. She has locked me in my own home. You have to stop this." His face, once open and kind, crumpled into a mask of adolescent anger. He ripped his headphones off. "Stop it. Mum, just stop. Can't you see Sophia is pregnant?" I froze. "What?" "Yes, pregnant," he hissed, his voice low and furious. "She's carrying your grandchild. She is nauseous. She is tired. She is under an incredible amount of stress. And all you do is undermine her and add to it. She is doing all of this, the budgeting, the security for the baby. She needs rest. Why can't you just stop stressing her out and leave her alone?" He pushed past me, slamming the bathroom door. A baby. A grandchild. The news should have been joyful, but it felt wrong. It felt like another move in her game, another piece she was placing on the board. I backed away, my mind reeling. That evening, I was tasked with taking out the trash. Sophia had started insisting I do more chores, to contribute. I collected the small bin from their bathroom. It was full, and right on top, nestled in the tissues and cotton swabs, was a bright pink, unmistakable cardboard box of tampons. Not liners, not pads. Tampons. I stood in the hallway, the plastic bin in my hand, the air leaving my lungs. It wasn't just a lie. It was a pathological, calculated fabrication. The pregnancy was a weapon, a shield she used to justify her cruelty and to secure David's loyalty. And David knew. He had to know. He was a willing participant in this sick theatre. Sophia wasn't just controlling. She was a liar. They both were. I walked to the kitchen and dumped the bathroom trash into the main bag. I felt nothing, The desperation that had been churning in my stomach for weeks suddenly cooled, hardening into something solid and heavy. The despair evaporated, and in its place was a quiet, Arctic rage. David wouldn't help me. He couldn't help me. He was one of them. I was completely, utterly alone. And I finally realized that was all I needed. The knowledge of their deception changed me. The fog of helplessness was burned away by the cold fire of that lie. I was no longer a victim waiting for rescue. I was an archivist, and I would find the records. My imprisonment now gave me one distinct advantage. I had nothing to do but watch. I learned their routines, their rhythms, the sounds of their movements in the house. I knew David was useless before noon. I knew Sophia spent 2 hours every afternoon in the bath, followed by her business calls. My opportunity came on a Friday. The fake pregnancy, I realized, was the perfect excuse for them to leave together for doctor's appointments. Sophia made a great show of being tired and nauseous as she had David help her into their car. "We'll be back after lunch." "Margot," she called out, the sound of her voice grating. "Don't bother making anything for us." I watched them drive away. I heard the familiar, chilling click of the padlock at the gate. I waited 5 full minutes, watching from the window, before I moved. I went straight to their room. The guest room Robert had built for his visiting sisters was now their fortress. It was immaculate, but not in a clean way, in a sterile, impersonal way, as if all traces of their true selves had been scrubbed. I started with the dresser, sifting through Sophia's expensive, barely worn clothes and David's t-shirts. Nothing. I checked under the mattress. Nothing. I was a practical woman, not a spy, and I felt a surge of frustration. Where would they keep their secrets? Then I saw David's desk, where he networked and gamed. It was a sea of chaos, empty energy drink cans, snack wrappers, and in the corner, a small, overflowing paper file tray. It was filled with what looked like junk mail. But as I sifted through it, I saw official-looking envelopes, not addressed to my post office box, but to them, at this street address. My hands were steady. I opened the first envelope. It was from a bank I had never heard of, Quantum Online Lending. It was a mortgage statement, a new mortgage, on this property. The balance listed was $72,000. I didn't have a mortgage. Robert and I had burned that document in a celebratory bonfire 15 years ago. My heart hammered against my ribs. I dug deeper into the pile. I found a thick manila envelope. Inside was a copy of my home's deed, and attached to it, a loan agreement. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the legal jargon, until I reached the final page. There was my signature, Margaret L. Reynolds. It wasn't a forgery. It was my handwriting. My mind raced, trying to make sense of an event that had never happened. I had not signed this. I would never sign this. And then, a memory, thick and blurry, rose to the surface. It was months ago, right after they arrived. I had been leveled by the worst influenza of my life. I was in bed for a week, my fever so high the room wouldn't stop tilting. Sophia had been a perfect angel, bringing me weak tea and aspirin, fluffing my pillows. Just a few more things. Margot, she had murmured, her voice soft, placing a stack of papers on the bedside table. It's just the forms for the health insurance. To get David and me on your plan, we have to update the household information. It's just a formality. I remembered my hand shaking, the pen feeling heavy. The text was a blur. I was so sick, so tired. I just wanted to be left alone. I would have signed anything to get her out of the room so I could sleep. I signed where she pointed. It wasn't an insurance form. It was a power of attorney, or a quitclaim deed. Something that gave them the power to leverage my home, the home Robert built, as collateral. They had used my illness and my trust to steal my life from under me. They had taken out a $75,000 loan in my name. The other papers in the file tray told the rest of the story. Credit card statements I had never seen. In their names. With enormous balances. A $30,000 charge for designer furniture, the grey sofa, the new bedroom set. A recurring payment to a vehicle storage lot in town. They had bought a new car, a fancy one, and were hiding it. And then, check stubs, dozens of them, made out to Sophia's Synergy Ventures, LLC, her pyramid scheme. They were systematically draining the equity from my home, spending it on luxuries and fantasies, all while they kept me chained to the property as their prisoner. They were ruining me financially and burying me alive in the process. The chain on the gate wasn't to keep thieves out. It was to keep me from discovering the theft that had already happened inside. I put every single paper back exactly as I had found it. The cold anger in my chest was no longer just anger. It had cooled, hardened, and sharpened. It was iron. They thought I was a confused, grieving old woman. They were about to find out how wrong they were. When I returned the file tray to David's desk, I was a different woman. The Margot who had grieved and felt victimized was gone, buried under the weight of those fraudulent papers. The Margot who emerged was a librarian, and a librarian, above all, knows that a problem is simply a piece of information you have not yet found. My first and most crucial piece of information was this: I could not call the police. I knew, with the certainty of a catalogued fact, how it would play out. Officer, my son and his wife have stolen my house. Oh, did they forge your signature? No, that's mine. But I was sick. I was confused. They'd smile, pat my hand, and share a look. They would speak to Sophia, who would cry, show them the fabricated medical concerns, perhaps even allude to the tragic pregnancy. They would see a controlling, vicious young woman. No, they would see a concerned, pregnant caregiver and a confused, forgetful, senile old woman. My word against theirs. My signature on their side. No, this was not a matter for the police. This was a civil matter, and I would handle it with all the quiet precision of my former profession. I needed a plan, and for that, I needed data. I needed an ally. Sophia and David had made a critical error in their assessment of me. They saw my age, not my experience. They had left me with my tools, thinking they were harmless relics. In my bedside drawer, under a pile of Robert's old handkerchiefs, was my old tablet computer. Sophia had seen it once, scoffed at the cracked screen, and dismissed it. "Why do you keep this junk?" "Margot," she'd asked. Beside it, in a small velvet box, was a 4G data SIM card I had bought for a trip years ago and never used. That night, long after the sounds of David's gaming and Sophia's self-congratulatory phone calls had ceased, my room was bathed in the faint blue light of the screen. I was online. My hands were steady as I photographed every single page from David's file tray. I uploaded them to a secure, new email account. And then, I composed a message. The recipient was Mr. Henderson, the lawyer who had handled Robert's will. He was a man of quiet integrity, who, like me, believed in the sanctity of a fact. I couldn't risk calling. The subject line was simple, regarding my will. I kept the message brief. I told him I was considering some changes to my estate. I told him I was sending some preliminary financial documents for his review, and that I was having some trouble with my phone. I attached the files, and I asked him to contact me via this email only. His reply came 2 days later. Margot, I have reviewed these documents. They are highly irregular. I need to speak with you. I will be in my office until 8 p.m. tonight. Please find a way to call. That night, I claimed food poisoning, a result of Sophia's optimized cooking, and locked myself in my bathroom. With the tap running, I called him. Mr. Henderson, it's Margot. His voice was grim. Margot, I'm glad you called. What you signed was not an insurance form. It was a durable power of attorney, granting Sophia full control of your finances in the event of medical incapacitation. But I'm not incapacitated, I whispered, the water roaring in the sink. You were, he said. The flu. They had a doctor's note verifying it. And Margot, it gets worse. They haven't just used this power. They filed a petition with the county court last week. They are seeking a full conservatorship. They are moving to have you declared legally incompetent. The fake pregnancy, the isolation, my forgetfulness in cancelling the book club, my inability to drive. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a script. They were building a case, painting me as a doddering old fool who couldn't be trusted with her own life, all so they could drain it dry. Margot, he said, his voice sharp, this is not just theft. This is a legal attack. They are trying to erase you. We have to act. This petition gives them a terrifying amount of leverage. I hung up the phone. I now had all the information I needed. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. They thought they were building a case. I would build a better one. They thought they had time. They didn't. They wanted something symbolic of their new ownership. Sophia's disdain for Robert's Gate came to my mind. My plan began to form, not just as a way out, but as a reckoning. It had to be fast. It had to be decisive. And it had to be a statement they would never forget. The next morning, I did not go to the gate. I did not retreat to my bedroom. I went downstairs and waited in the kitchen. When Sophia emerged, coffee in hand, I put on the most defeated expression I could muster. I had rehearsed this. Sophia, I began, my voice intentionally thin and reedy. She glanced up from her phone. Her eyes narrowed, expecting another argument. I wanted to apologize, I said, looking at my hands clasped on the table. I have been difficult. I know that. She said nothing, just watched me, wary. You are right, I continued, letting my voice tremble just a little. I'm just an old woman. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. You and David have so much to deal with the baby, and I'm just getting in the way. Her posture changed. The defensive stiffness in her shoulders relaxed. She leaned back, a look of smug pity settling on her face. Well, Margot, she said, her voice dripping with false magnanimity. I'm glad you're finally seeing things rationally. I am, I said. And I've been thinking. I have my retirement savings account. It's what Robert left. It's not much. Maybe $10,000 left. I want to put it in a joint account with you and David, so you can take care of it for me. You are so much better at finances. You can just manage it. For my future. I risked a glance at her face. Her eyes were no longer cold or wary. They were bright, gleaming with a raw, uncomplicated greed. This was the final jackpot. This was the last pocket she hadn't yet picked. A joint account, she repeated, tasting the words. Yes, Margot. That is a very, very smart decision. But, I said, adding a note of anxious confusion, I called the bank. They have some new rule. Because of my age, I have to come in person to sign the transfer forms. They said they need to see me, to verify that I am lucid. The word hung in the air. A perfect, poisonous dart. It was the very thing they were trying to prove I wasn't. Sophia's jaw tightened. She hated the inconvenience, but the prize was too great. That's absurd, she snapped. But fine. If that's the rule, we'll go. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., and I will be right there with you to help you with the forms. Oh, thank you, Sophia, I said, flooding my voice with relief. Thank you, dear. You just want what's best. The drive to the bank the next morning was tense. Sophia drove my car, a proprietary air about her, as if she were already in charge of every aspect of my life. She walked me into the lobby, her hand firmly on my elbow. I'll wait right here, she said, sitting in a chair that faced the teller line. You just get the forms. I nodded meekly and walked up to the counter. My heart was beating a slow, cold rhythm. The teller who called me forward was a young woman I recognized from the library, Sarah. She had been one of my best pages when she was 16. Mrs. Reynolds? She said with a warm, professional smile. It's so good to see you. How can I? Her smile faltered as she saw the look in my eyes. I leaned in, pushing my driver's license and account card under the glass. I glanced back at Sophia, who was busy scrolling on her phone, bored and impatient. Sarah, I whispered, my voice low and urgent. I need your help, and you must do exactly as I say. I need to close my retirement account. I need to withdraw the entire balance. Now. In cash. Sarah's eyes widened. Mrs. Reynolds, that's over $10,000? Are you sure? Is everything all right? I am perfectly sure, I said, my voice hardening with an authority she remembered. I am of sound mind, and I am in a hurry. Please, Sarah, do it quickly and quietly. She looked past me, at Sophia, then back at me. She saw the truth. She nodded. One moment. While she was in the back, I pulled out the old, battered flip phone I kept in my purse, a dumb phone Sophia saw as a joke. I dialed a number I had found on my tablet. A man answered with a gruff, Maple Creek Scrap. Yes, I said, my voice low. I have a large, ornamental iron gate. Wrought iron. Very heavy. I need it removed tonight. I can pay cash. How early can you be here? I gave him my address. A pause. 4:45 a.m. That will be perfect. I hung up. Sarah returned with 10 thick banded envelopes. She pushed them under the counter. Out of sight. What else? She whispered. As soon as this transaction is complete, I said, I want you to place an immediate, indefinite freeze on all my accounts. Everything. Put a fraud alert on them. Make it so that nothing can be withdrawn or deposited by anyone without my physical presence and a direct call to this man. I slid Mr. Henderson's business card across the counter. He is my lawyer. He is expecting this. It's done, she said, her face grim. I put the envelopes into the bottom of my large handbag, covering them with my wallet and an old scarf. I turned, my face a mask of weary compliance, and walked back to Sophia. She stood up, her eyes bright with anticipation. "Well, did you sign the papers?" I patted my handbag and gave her a small, tired smile. "It's all finished, dear. Everything has been taken care of." Her face split into a wide, predatory grin. "Good," she said, grabbing my elbow again. "See how easy that was? Now let's go home." That evening was a performance. Sophia, flush with the victory of having secured my final assets, did not bother with the pretense of cooking. She ordered a lavish, expensive dinner from the Hearth, the fanciest restaurant in Maple Creek. The aroma of rosemary, garlic, and seared steak, a scent that had not been in this house for months, filled the kitchen. She also produced 2 bottles of expensive red wine, a vintage I had been saving for a special occasion that, in my mind, had never arrived. "A celebration," she announced to David, her voice ringing with a brittle, metallic triumph. "To our new beginning." David, who had been a shadow in the house for months, seemed to come alive. He was giddy, his eyes bright. He set Robert's polished dining table with my wedding china, the plates I hadn't seen in 2 years, handling them with a carelessness that made my breath catch. They sat down, and I took my usual seat, an unwanted ghost at their feast. They talked as if I were not there. They talked through me, their voices loud and their laughter sharp. "The first thing that has to go is this dreadful wallpaper," Sophia declared, waving her wine glass at the wall Robert and I had papered together. "I'm thinking a very pale grey, very minimalist. It will brighten the whole space." "And the kitchen," David added, his words slightly slurred after his second glass. "All new appliances, top of the line, stainless steel. That old stove is an antique." "Of course, baby," Sophia said, reaching across the table to pat his hand. "But honestly, why renovate? We should just sell. The market is strong. We take the money from this place, and we finally get out of this frozen dump. I was looking at condos in Naples, Florida. Right on the water?" "Florida," David breathed, his eyes glazed with the vision of it. "Palm trees. No more snow." "Exactly," Sophia said. "A fresh start? Just the 3 of us." She glanced at me then, a quick, dismissive flick of her eyes. "Well, you know, we'll have everything we need." They were planning to sell my home, Robert's legacy, and move to Florida. They were dividing up my life while I was still living it. I said nothing. I just ate, my food tasting like ash. I watched the woman who had stolen my future and the son who had held the door open for her. David refilled his glass and finally turned to me, his gaze unfocused. "See, Mom," he said, his voice thick with wine and self-congratulation. "I told you it would all work out. Sophia, she's smart. She knows how to handle things." He leaned in, his breath sour. "It's just so good that you finally get it. It makes everything so much easier." I looked at my son, at the stranger sitting in his skin. I held his gaze. "Yes, David?" I said, my voice quiet and perfectly steady. "You are absolutely right. I finally understand everything." My agreement seemed to break the last of his tension. He laughed, a short, barking sound, and turned back to Sophia. Satisfied. Sophia, however, was not finished. She was basking in her power, the uncontested queen of my home. She leaned back, swirling the wine in her glass. And tomorrow, David, the very first thing I am going to do, now that everything is simplified, is get rid of that hideous thing in the driveway. My hand tightened on the stem of my water glass. That rusty, depressing old gate. She continued, her voice dripping with disdain. It's ugly. It's ancient. It makes the whole property look junky. We'll replace it with a proper security fence. Something modern. Automatic. With a keypad. I set my glass down. I looked at her face flushed with victory and wine, and I allowed the smallest, faintest smile to touch my lips. That's a very good idea. Sophia? She nodded, accepting my surrender as her due. They finished their wine, leaving the expensive plates and smeared glasses on the table. A mess for the help. A mess for me. They went to their room, their laughter echoing in the hallway. I did not clear the table. I left the remnants of their celebration to congeal in the cold night air. I did not go to bed. I went to my room and sat in the hard-backed chair by the window. I did not turn on the light. I sat in the darkness, my handbag with its precious, heavy envelopes resting by my feet. Outside, the moonlight was bright, illuminating the intricate, hand-forged iron branches of the gate. Robert's gift. It stood guard, solid and real, a memory of a time when this house was a home. I watched it, my hand on the cold window pane. I watched it for hours. I was not tired. I was waiting. I was waiting for 4:45 in the morning. I was waiting for the dawn. At 4:45 in the morning, the world was pitch black and frozen. The silence was absolute, a heavy, cold blanket over the Vermont landscape. I moved without a sound. I slipped out the back door, closing it softly behind me, down the road, perhaps a quarter mile. I saw them 2 small parking lights, barely visible. They were waiting. I walked to Robert's workshop, the key sliding into the lock with a familiar, oily click. The air inside was frigid, smelling of cold metal and ancient sawdust. I went to the far wall, where his heavy tools hung in neat, orderly rows. I took down the largest pair of bolt cutters he owned. They were 4 feet long, heavy and powerful. The red rubber grips cold against my palms. I carried them back out into the darkness. I stood before the gate, before Sophia's ugly, industrial chain and her brass padlock. The moonlight glinted off the metal, the only light I had. I looked at the links, thick as my thumb, that held my husband's work captive. I positioned the jaws of the cutter around the padlock's hardened steel shackle. I took a deep breath, the icy air stinging my lungs. I planted my feet, gripped the handles, and threw every ounce of my 68 years, every ounce of my grief, and every last drop of my cold, quiet rage into them. There was a moment of resistance, a metallic groan, and then a sharp, explosive crack that shattered the pre-dawn stillness. It was the sound of a gunshot, the sound of a bone breaking. The padlock flew apart, and the heavy chain unwound itself from the iron bars, crashing to the frozen gravel with a sound like discordant bells. The sound was a signal. Down the road, the parking lights vanished, replaced by the sudden, blinding glare of high-beam headlights. A heavy-duty flatbed truck, its engine a low rumble, turned into the drive. It pulled right onto the lawn, its tires crushing the dormant grass, and stopped, its lights flooding the front of the house in a stark, artificial day. 2 men, large and silhouetted, jumped down from the cab. One of them, A shape in a thick coat pointed at me. "Mrs. Reynolds," he yelled over the idling engine. "I am," I called back, my voice firm. "You called about the gate. You got the cash." "I have it," I said. "Let's get this done." They wasted no time. They were professionals. One man pulled a heavy-duty portable generator from the truck bed, while the other uncoiled thick orange cables. He sparked a portable welding torch, and a brilliant, hissing blue-white light erupted in the darkness, throwing wild, dancing shadows across the house. The scream of the torch cutting through the heavy iron hinges Robert had set into the stone pillars was a sound I will never forget. It was a shriek, a wail of tormented metal that was louder than any alarm clock, louder than any shout. Sparks rained down onto the driveway like angry fireflies. The second man used a sledgehammer to break the anchor points. The clang, clang, clang of steel on steel echoing off the trees. The noise was apocalyptic. It was beautiful. I stood on the porch, unmoving, watching it all. I had pulled Robert's old barn coat over my nightgown, in my left hand. I held the two severed halves of the chain. It took less than 3 minutes for the lights inside the house to snap on. The front door was thrown open, and David stumbled out onto the porch, his eyes wide and wild with sleep and confusion. What the hell is going on? Is it a fire?" Sophia was right behind him, her silk robe clutched at her throat, her face a mask of pale, furious disbelief. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice cutting through the noise. "What are they doing?" She saw the men, she saw the torch, she saw the gate, her symbol of control, hanging crookedly, sparks flying from its last connection. "Stop!" she screamed, running down the steps onto the lawn, her bare feet sinking into the frost. "Stop that right now, that's my property, you can't touch that." The man with the torch powered it down, the sudden silence almost as deafening as the noise. He looked from the hysterical woman in her pajamas to me, the quiet woman on the porch. He looked confused. "Ma'am?" he asked, pointing his chin at Sophia. I said nothing. I just shook my head. Once. "Continue," I said, my voice carrying in the cold air. "Mom!" David yelled, his voice cracking. "Have you gone insane? What are you doing?" I walked slowly down the steps, my feet steady on the cold stone. I walked past Sophia, who was trembling with a rage so profound she was speechless. I walked until I stood in the middle of the driveway, bathed in the truck's headlights, and watched as they cut the last hinge. With a final, grating shriek, the last hinge was severed. The men, using a small crane on the truck, lifted the entire gate, Robert's masterpiece, Sophia's prison, off its stone moorings and secured it to the flatbed with heavy chains. Sophia was vibrating, a low growl of pure, undiluted rage building in her throat. "I am going to sue you," she shrieked at the workmen. "I am going to sue her. You are all going to jail." "Mom!" David finally yelled, his voice cracking with a pathetic, childish panic. "Have you lost your mind? You can't just sell the gate." I turned slowly, my entire body calm, and faced them. The truck's headlights cast me in a harsh, bright light, making me a figure on a stage. "No, David," I said, my voice perfectly level, cutting through the cold morning air. "I have never been more sane. Sophia was absolutely right last night. It was an ugly, old-fashioned thing. It made the house look junky. I am simply upgrading. But, He was incapable of forming a thought without her. The lead workman walked toward me, away from the truck, holding a clipboard and a pen. "All right. Mrs. Reynolds, just need you to sign the pickup confirmation." I walked over, took the pen, and signed my name. My hand was as steady as a rock. He tore off a sheet. "And as agreed, payment on removal." He handed me a folded business check. $3,000. It's beautiful ironwork. We'll find a good buyer for it, someone who'll appreciate it. "I'm sure you will," I said. "Thank you for your prompt service." He tipped his hat, and the two men climbed back into their cab. The heavy engine roared, the headlights swung across the lawn, and the truck pulled out of the driveway, disappearing down the road. There was silence. It was just the three of us, standing in the driveway, in the weak, grey light that comes just before the sun. Sophia's eyes were locked on the check in my hand. Her mind was already spinning, calculating how to get it, how to spin this, how to maintain control. "You are senile," she finally hissed, taking a step toward me. "You're incompetent. David, call the police. She's giving away our assets." "My assets." "Sophia?" I corrected her, my voice quiet, but it carried. I held up the check. "This is for you." Her eyes widened, a flicker of confusion, then greedy triumph. She thought I was surrendering, giving her the money. I walked toward her, right up until I was standing so close I could see the tiny capillaries of rage in her eyes. "I've been thinking about your future," I said, loud enough for David to hear every single word. "Your new beginning in Florida." Her face went pale. "Those mortgage papers you had me sign when I was sick, the ones you used to take out that $75,000 loan," I said, my voice clear as a bell. "My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, filed an emergency injunction at 9 a.m. yesterday. The power of attorney has been revoked. All my accounts are frozen." I saw the truth land. I saw the blood drain from her face. "That $75,000 debt, Sophia," I continued, "is now linked directly to you. You signed the loan applications. You committed the fraud. And since the bank has no collateral, seeing as my house is, and always has been, in my name and mine alone, they will be coming for their money. They will be coming for you." I reached into the deep pocket of Robert's coat. I pulled out the heavy, severed links of the chain and the shattered brass padlock. I dropped them on the gravel at her feet with a heavy clang. "And this," I said, holding the check for $3,000. "This is your seed money." I let it flutter from my fingers, landing on the ground on top of the broken chain. "For you to start over, somewhere else." "Mum," David whispered, the word a desperate plea. "Mum, please, it's cold. You have 10 minutes, I said, my voice flat, cutting him off. 10. You can gather your personal items, your laptops, your clothes. Nothing else. Nothing you bought with my money." "You can't do this," Sophia shrieked, finding her voice. "This is our home. We live here. You can't just throw us out." "You live nowhere," I stated, the words like chips of ice. "You are trespassers. And as of 5:15 a.m., my lawyer is placing a call to the Maple Creek Police. He is informing them that 2 individuals will need to be escorted from my property for trespassing, fraud, and elder abuse." David began to sob, a high, thin, ugly sound. "Mum, please, we have nowhere to go, please." I looked at my son, at the man who had traded his mother for a life he was too weak to earn. I felt nothing. I turned my back on them, leaving them standing in the drive with the check and the chain in the dirt. I walked to the end of the lawn, to the 2 empty stone pillars. The sky in the east was turning a pale, bruised purple, and the first edge of the sun was just beginning to crest the Vermont mountains. I breathed in the cold, sharp air. I was free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm really curious. Where are all of you listening from today? Please drop a comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and maybe hit that hype button to help other folks find this story. It really does help.